they really didn't give the original McDonald's much of a break. The little drive-in was torn down in 1972. Today, only a small plaque remembers the billions of burgers it gave birth to. What makes a restaurant a hit or a miss? Well, as any real estate dealer will tell you, it's location, 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 which explains why the Rex isn't with us anymore. The Rex was not exactly handy. You had to take a water taxi 3 miles out into Santa Monica Bay, cost 25 cents, and then climb aboard a beautiful old sailing freighter, which had been converted at considerable expense into a gambling casino. Well, no big thing today, but before World War II, this was major news. And there were similar ships moored off Redondo and Long Beach. An armada of sin was on the horizon, and 1,000 sinners a night were floating out to shoot dice and spin the wheel.
You see these white boats out there, and they had flags flying, and we knew what they were. There was gossip, you know. And at night, they were all lighted. So you could see these beautiful twinkly lights. They were very festive, very glamorous looking, and very wicked sounding.
Your host was a handsome, well-dressed fellow named Tony Corneiro, who had made a bundle smuggling booze during Prohibition. Tony had charm and he had money, but his reputation left a lot to be desired. I mean, he was not a member of the Jonathan Club, if you get what I mean.
If they were gangsters, they didn't look like the ones portrayed in the movies. I mean, like James Cagney or Edward G. Robinson, nothing like that. But we thought it was a lot of fun. And no amount was too small to gamble. A nickel, dime, quarter, anything. I've seen people playing roulette for nickels.
The gambling ships were a great success and a great adventure, but they made one little mistake. They lured the gamblers away from the gambling on shore, away from the Sunset Strip and Santa Anita. So Mayor Fletcher Bowron organized the police and the feds to attack the ships with fire hoses. And that was the famous Battle of Santa Monica Bay, where Tony Corneiro said, "I will not give up the ship." But later he did anyway, and that was that. The whole kit and caboodle was deep-sixed. As for Tony Corneiro and all those sinners, well, they retreated to a place on dry land called Las Vegas.
This doesn't rhyme, but one of these days soon we'll be seeing you. In the meantime, this is Bob Welk thanking you for those letters to commence
Hey,
performance.
now there's a familiar voice. And you know, we used to really pay attention to these radios. I mean, that was not just audible wallpaper. In the early television sets, we really watched them. They were more than electronic furniture. Now they're all empty. The faces and voices that made these come to life are also things that aren't here anymore. Seemed to me we should pay attention to some important people of Los Angeles. The first live televised dancing show originated in the Santa Monica Ballroom, and the orchestra leader was a fellow named Donnell Clyde Cooley. Spade Cooley! A fiddler who was also a real violinist, Cooley added strings and complicated arrangements to all those guitars, and before long, country and western music moved out of the hayloft and into the living room. Spade Cooley became known as the king of western swing, and he was the king.
Everyone watched the Spade Cooley show. And he was by our, I mean West Coast. He was the West Coast edition of Ed Sullivan. There was no competition for him on Saturday nights.
While Spade Cooley may have been the first Los Angeles television star, he was also a falling star. In a few years, champagne music drowned out the Western swing. Lawrence Welk became king of the TV hill. A troubled career, trouble with the bottle, a troubled marriage, a troubled man. Maybe you remember.
He had separated from his wife because she finally got to the point where she couldn't take his drinking and his temper. And he'd gone up to the house, I guess to see her, and was drunk. And they got into a fight, and he killed her.
But that was not the end. There were still a few bars of music left in the song of Spade Cooley. Years later, he was given a temporary leave so he could perform at a sheriff's benefit concert.
He was out on the stage, and people were cheering. He walked off the stage and was backstage, and he says, "Well, I guess I'm back." And they're yelling and stamping. He walked towards the stage, grabbed the curtain, had a heart attack, and died, with the cheers of the audience, the applause in his ears.
If nothing else, Spade Cooley was able to fulfill his last wish. He didn't die in prison, but he'll forever be known as our first television tragedy. If you listen to radio and watch enough television, you were bound to hear this voice, a real madman, our greatest used car dealer. Remember Madman Montz and all those crazy TV commercials? Earl Montz was among the first super salesmen, a tireless promoter, a major manufacturer, and a genuine inventor. Put them all together, they spell phenomenon.
Other products were sold by announcers. This man sold his own products.
Madman Montz was more than a raucous pitchman. First he sold used cars, but then he made his own cars. Remember the Montz Jet? And then he manufactured his own television sets. He not only coined the term TV, he named his daughter TV.
The idea wasn't, though, I think, buying a new television. It was buying something that Madman Montz was selling.
Later, Montz developed 8-track tape decks, and before he died in 1987, he was working on cellular phones. But more than anything else, Madman Montz invented the Los Angeles way of life. But early Los Angeles television did more than unleash colorful commercials.
I'm Joe Pine, and the action starts here in just a moment.
In uncorked vox pop, the voice of the people, the ordinary guy with something to say, or nothing to say, and somebody to talk to.
How much more time do you want?
I want enough time to explain the difference between church and religion.
How much? How much?
Until you're convinced.
In that case, take a walk now. We'll be back to the dock after these words.
Joe Pine was an early excitement on television. In the mid-'60s, he came along, an acerbic talk show host, ultra-conservative, who would be very, very rude to his guests. He'd tell them to put your teeth in backwards and chew out your throat.
Joe Pine was a chain-smoking Marine Corps vet with 4 World War II ribbons and 1 leg as a result. And every day on the air, he was still doing battle.
We want to show our gratitude. He will present you with a ticket to an earthquake. And I'll be right back to the dock.
Joe Pine was biased and belligerent, clever and charming, but most of all,